Throughout the dynasties, the emperors of China, from the legendary Yellow Emperor up to 20th century Emperor Puyi, had concubines. Why did this system exist? While media representations of imperial concubines often display them as romantic distractions to the monarch, their role was essentially double. Firstly, it allowed for political alliances to be forged between the imperial clan and powerful noble families. But most importantly, concubines were expected to bear sons for the emperor, to ensure the imperial lineage would not stop. In this video, I'll explain how the Qing dynasty adapted this ancient system and how it worked, using examples of emperors and their concubines. Without further ado, let's dive into the Qing dynasty's imperial harem system. The Qing dynasty was the ultimate dynasty of imperial China. Its leaders were not of Han Chinese ethnicity, but of the conquering Manchu people who captured Beijing in 1644, overthrowing the Ming dynasty. At the time, the Qing leader was officially 5-year-old child Emperor Shunzhi, son of Qing Emperor Huang Taiji. Shunzhi initially reigned under the regency of Manchu nobleman Dorgon, who guided him into claiming the mandate of heaven. The young emperor would therefore become the first Qing leader to rule over China proper. Also being the first Qing emperor to rule from the imperial city of Beijing, Shunzhi defined the main rules the Qing dynasty's imperial harem system would have to follow. Notably, it was declared that concubines would be almost exclusively selected from Manchu and Mongol noble families, separating the imperial bloodline from the Han Chinese and other ethnic groups. Some emperors would nonetheless choose non-Manchu or Mongol concubines, as the official Qing records count 9 Han and 1 Uyghur concubine. Emperor Shunzhi's son, Emperor Kangxi, would make the final changes in the harem system, which would then remain virtually unchanged until the end of the dynasty. The process of selection of consorts to the emperor was very elaborate. Every 3 years, noble families from the Manchu and Mongol 8 banners, a military and nobility system of the Qing dynasty, were ordered to bring their daughters aged around 13 to 16 years old to Beijing. If a suitable daughter was unable to come to the imperial capital due to logistical or health issues, she would have to participate in the following year. Upon the selection day, the candidates would enter the Forbidden City through the back gate, known as Gate of Divine Prowess. Each girl was accompanied by parents or close relatives and escorted by family and clan leaders, as well as officials from their hometowns. Usually, about 100 to 300 candidates were brought to the Forbidden City every 3 years. An initial inspection was held, based on appearance and demeanour, after which selected candidates were registered as xiaoyu, while the others were allowed to return home. More in-depth selections considering other factors such as intellectual skills then took place to distinguish suitable concubines. By then, the number of candidates was down to a few dozen or less. The final selection was held in front of the Palace of Heavenly Purity, though at times it also happened elsewhere in the Forbidden City. The emperor was then free to pick several girls as concubines. However, they often had to be approved by the Empress Dowager, usually his mother or a previous empress. In cases where the emperor was still a minor, the Empress Dowager would guide the selection for him. The criteria for the selection was based on the girl's beauty, health, talents and education, and family heritage. More often than not, women were selected mainly on this last aspect. In theory, the emperor could choose as many concubines as he wanted from the lot. One of them could even be immediately selected as empress if the position was vacant. However, only 5 of 28 empresses during the Qing dynasty directly entered the palace with this rank. Girls who were not selected by the emperor could then be chosen as wives or concubines by the imperial princes, lesser princes, or other men in the royalty. The basis of the harem system, which was not exactly a rank, was the position of palace maid. Palace maids were selected once every year to act as servants to concubines in the Forbidden City. They were chosen from lesser noble families. These servants were expected to devote their lives inside the Forbidden City to servicing their mistress, staying by her side at all times. Palace maids usually remained in service in the Forbidden City until they were 25, after which they could leave if they wished to. However, some appreciated maids were asked to keep serving until up to 35 years old. It was not unusual for the emperor to catch an eye for a palace maid. In this situation, she could be bestowed with the title of lady-in-waiting, granting her authority over other maids, although she remained a servant. Ladies-in-waiting could then be promoted to a concubine rank if she won the emperor's favour. A famous example is that of Empress Xiao Yichun, the only Han empress of the Qing dynasty. During her life, she was able to rise through the ranks from lady-in-waiting to imperial noble consort, and was posthumously promoted as empress. She was also the mother of Yongyan, future Emperor Jiaqing. The lowest of the official 8 ranks was that of Da Yin, or second-class female attendant. The emperor could select as many girls as he wanted to this position. They would each be granted 2 palace maids to serve them. As part of the harem, they enjoyed better conditions than maids, although they had little authority. Much like the second-class female attendant, there was an unlimited number of changzai, or first-class female attendants. These were however served by 3 palace maids. They had slightly more authority than the previous rank, but were also lesser concubines. The next position in the system, named Guiren, or noble lady, could also be awarded to as many girls as the emperor saw fit. Noble ladies would each be served by 4 palace maids. The women bestowed with the 3 previous titles all lived together in the same quarters of the Forbidden City, while those holding the upcoming titles had dedicated quarters or even palaces. The next rank, called Pin, translated as imperial concubines, was limited to the number of 6 at a time, and each would be served by 6 palace maids. These usually had direct authority over previous ranks, acting as intermediary between the harem's mistresses and low-rank concubines. Above the imperial concubines were the consorts, or fei. The emperor could only select a maximum of 4 consorts at a time. This was a powerful position, as consorts officially had authority over eunuchs in the Forbidden City. The next rank was that of noble consort, or guifei, that each had 8 palace maids at her service. There could only be a maximum of 2 noble consorts for the emperor. Next, there was only 1 imperial noble consort, or huang guifei. She had the same number of servants as regular noble consorts, but considerably more influence, only submitting to the empress in the imperial harem. The position of imperial noble consort was however rarely bestowed. Reasons that the emperor would promote a concubine to this rank were usually either to maintain order in the harem if there was no empress or if she was unable to fulfill this role, and or as an intermediate promotion in the prospect of making her the empress. Finally, there was only 1 empress. She was technically the only wife of the emperor. Often, empresses started as lower-rank concubines and were gradually promoted. In cases where the emperor had already been married as a prince, his wife would automatically become the empress. She was usually not the monarch's favourite in the imperial harem, but rather chosen for her family heritage and intellectual skills. In many cases, the emperors actually spent as little time as they could with her, only respecting the mandatory 1 day per month together. Nonetheless, the empress's ceremonial role was extremely important. She was expected to lead an exemplary life according to Confucian morals and Manchu customs. Many empresses took a passive or even active part in state affairs. Officially, the empress acted as the mother of all the emperor's children, even if they were not her actual biological offspring. These 8 ranks were the official positions of concubines within the imperial harem. There was, however, another even more powerful rank within the Forbidden City, which could not be obtained by promotion: Empress Dowager. If a concubine's son became the next emperor after his father died, that woman would be promoted as Empress Dowager. Simultaneously, as the official wife of the late emperor was symbolically the mother of all his children, she would also be de facto promoted as Empress Dowager. A distinction, however, existed between biological and symbolical Empress Dowager. For example, after the death of Emperor Xianfeng, both his wife, Empress Zhen, and concubine Yi, the mother of his successor Tongzhi, were promoted as Empresses Dowager. If by chance the Empress Dowager was still alive when her grandson ascended the throne, she would become Grand Empress Dowager. Such was the case for Grand Empress Dowager Xiao Kangzhang, Emperor Kangxi's grandmother, who raised him and guided him into reclaiming imperial power from his regents at 15 years old. The emperor was technically free to promote any concubine at will. Nonetheless, a rapid ascension from a low position was often frowned upon by the imperial entourage, especially by rival concubines. Giving birth to a son was the best way to ensure a strong and stable promotion, or even potential ascension as Empress Dowager if that son was to become the next emperor. This was exactly the case for Empress Dowager Cexi. After she gave birth to Zaichun, future Emperor Tongzhi, his father Emperor Xianfeng promoted her from concubine Yi to consort Yi. Once Tongzhi ascended the throne, she became Empress Dowager. Similarly, concubines could also be demoted for mistakes and bad behavior. A famous example is that of Qianlong's consort Dun, who ordered the palace maid to be severely beaten for a small mistake. As the palace maid died from this punishment, Qianlong demoted consort Dun to concubine Dun. The imperial concubines were all housed together in the 6 eastern and 6 western palaces of the Forbidden City. As explained earlier, lower-ranked concubines lived together in quarters, while the higher ones could have up to a whole palace for themselves. Daily life for concubines, especially for those who the emperor paid little to no attention, was particularly boring, as they essentially lived in a gilded prison. The main distractions were playing board games, appreciating the many works of art within the Forbidden City, and enjoying its gardens. Concubines could also find entertainment in pets such as cats and dogs. The vast majority were never allowed to leave the Forbidden City. However, high-ranked and favoured ladies occasionally accompanied the emperor on outings. Emperor Qianlong regularly took his favourite concubines with him during his southern tours. According to morals and customs, concubines could not remarry after the emperor's passing, as his successor would have his own set of girls to select. However, the widowed concubines were not allowed to return home either. They were instead moved to other quarters within the Forbidden City. These were the Palace of Compassion and Tranquility, or Ceninggong, for regular concubines, and Palace of Longevity and Good Health, or Shaokangong, for Empresses Dowager. Widow concubines could still be promoted or demoted by emperors of the next generations, both during their lifetimes and posthumously. After the Qing dynasty was overthrown in 1912, the Forbidden City kept functioning as normal for another 12 years, although Emperor Puyi and the court no longer ruled the country, which was now a republic. In 1922, when Puyi was 16 years old, he selected girls based on photographs and was soon married to Empress Wanrong and took Wenxiu as consort Shu. The system was however bound to come to an end. After warlord Feng Yuxiang seized Beijing amidst a raging civil war in 1924, he ordered the evacuation of the Forbidden City. Launched into an unfamiliar world, Emperor Puyi and his 2 wives, Empress Wanrong and Wenxiu, found refuge in the Japanese concession in Tianjin. A few years later, in 1931, Wenxiu asked for and was granted a divorce, symbolically marking the end of the Qing dynasty's harem system.
I want a divorce.
Spanning over nearly 3 centuries, the Qing imperial harem system was marked by political schemes, personal rivalries, love and jealousy. It still fascinates to this day, as many modern television shows are based entirely on palace intrigue, often romanticizing the harsh reality. Thank you for watching my video, I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions or requests, feel free to leave them in the comment section below.